next have a panel titled From Welfare to Empowerment, Building Future-Ready Social Justice Systems. The session is co-hosted by MoSJE, Ministry of Social Justice and Empowerment. This session asks what it takes for India to build just, equitable, and future-ready social systems, moving from intent to impactful action. I would first like to call upon the panelists, Advocate K. Parameshwar, Senior Advocate, Supreme Court of India, Pritha Venkatachalam, Partner and Co-Head, Asia and Africa, the Bridgespan Group, one second. Pritha Venkatachalam, Partner and Co-Head, Asia and Africa, the Bridgespan Group. Rukmini Banerji, CEO, Pratham Education Foundation. Yep. There your names are. Shaveta Sharma-Kukreja, CEO and Managing Director, Central Square Foundation. Advocate K. Parameshwar ji will just be joining us in a while. This session is moderated by Vikram Chandra, Founder and Managing Director, Editor GE Technologies. Before this panel begins, however, we will have a keynote by Mr. Amit Yadav ji, IAS Secretary, Department of Social Justice and Empowerment, Government of India. May I please invite Shri Amit Yadav ji to first present the keynote. Thank you.
A very good evening to everyone. I'll start my keynote address by quoting Dr. Ambedkar. He says, the measure of any society is how it treats the most vulnerable members. And I think so that's the most important thing for us. And that's how the department works, that how we are able to address the vulnerable. Distinguished panelists, esteemed guests, ladies and gentlemen, it's both a pleasure and responsibility to speak on how we shape as we move ahead on future-ready social justice systems in India. India's journey since independence has been marked by a deep commitment to social justice, a constitutional promise to uplift the most marginalized and ensure dignity for all. The Constitution of India laid the foundation for a just, inclusive, and equitable society by embedding the principles of social justice at its very core. Though the provisions of justice, equality, liberty, and fraternity is envisioned as a nation where every individual, regardless of caste, gender, religion, or economic issue, has equal access to opportunity and life of dignity. This constitutional vision continues to guide the department mission to translate social justice from principle to practice. In the early decades, welfare-oriented interventions such as reservations, subsidies, and targeted schemes aimed at alleviating poverty, hunger, and exclusion. These initiatives have tried to undo the injustice of caste, class, gender, and ability in the society. India today stands at a transformative junction, where India has emerged as the fastest growing economy in the world. It is at this point that it becomes imperative that our understanding of welfare, traditionally seen as protection, evolves into empowerment through participation. The journey of the Department of Social Justice and Empowerment reflects the very transition from delivering entitlements to enabling capabilities, from providing safety nets to building launchpads for dignity, opportunity, and aspirations. The department works for the empowerment of the most marginalized communities and vulnerable groups such as the scheduled caste communities, other backward classes, denotified tribes, senior citizens, victims of substance abuse, transgender persons, beggars, sanitation workers, and waste pickers. The initiative of the department have consistently made effort to protect them from exclusion through intervention in largely three areas: education, economic, and social empowerment. Empowerment demands that a shift from fragmented measures to integrated lifestyle-based approach, where education, skilling, employment, health, and social protection are seen as interconnected rights and not isolated entitlements. Today's discussion with the panel will deliberate on 5 major themes that remain at the forefront in this journey of a marginalized individual from being a mere beneficiary to being an active partner in the development journey of the country. Education has always been the first bridge between welfare and empowerment. It is the greatest tool, not just for literacy, but for leadership and confidence to create pathways to help the most marginalized to reimagine themselves as active agents of change. The department provides scholarship support to SC, OBCs, and children of those engaged in unclean occupation. Primarily, the scholarship schemes were designed to ensure access to prevent dropouts among school children from scheduled caste and other backward classes due to financial hardships. They addressed a basic equity gap. However, these scholarships no longer just help children enter school or college, they help them stay, succeed, and move upwards. Each scholarship supports a learner to develop knowledge, skills, and confidence, assets that multiply across generations. Thus, the scholarship ceases to be a subsidy, it becomes seed capital for empowerment. The outcome is not only enrollment, it is mobility of all the three kinds. As I said, social, educational, and economic. Once the educational foundation is laid, skilling is provided. The skilling programs are designed not as isolated interventions, but as bridges connecting education and meaningful livelihoods. In order to ensure that education and skilling opportunities culminate into employment opportunities, both self and wage employment, market linkages play a significant role. Economic empowerment is the cornerstone of sustainable social justice. When communities gain control over their livelihoods, welfare can transform into wealth creation. To move beyond job seeking towards job creation, the government has built an ecosystem of financial and business supports through various access to low-cost loans through various institutions, which provide small-ticket concessional loans and financial linkages that help first-generation entrepreneurs turn their ideas into enterprises. I'll give you one example, a small scheme, but which makes a difference, the Swachhta Udyami Yojana, which offers capital subsidy on sanitation vehicles to the sanitation workers so that they become Sani entrepreneurs, ensuring dignity, enterprise, and empowerment, thus making them owners, not just workers, in the sanitation value chain. While provisions of protective gears and safety training form necessary and humane interventions, concessional loans and mechanized cleaning equipment help transform these sanitation workers' identity from a wage earner to a micro entrepreneur. Similarly, through the initiatives like Smile Scheme for Transgender Welfare and individuals engaged in begging, we are creating new pathways for dignity and inclusion. Social empowerment, the second empowerment, begins when every individual, regardless of caste, age, or circumstances, is capable of contributing to the society. For victims of substance abuse, empowerment may mean rehabilitation or reintegration and not stigma to them. For senior citizens, it may mean care with dignity, not as a charity. For sanitation workers and waste picker, it means safe work and upward mobility. Technology definitely is a critical enabler in this transformation. The digital public infrastructure and the social stack platforms which we are trying to build such as Aadhaar, UPI, and DigiLockers have enabled real-time tracking of beneficiary, education, and livelihood progress, and ability to access government benefits. Thus, the DPIs in India have created digital identity and portability of credentials, which are helpful in designing targeted interventions. As technology and AI reshape the world, we must ensure that digital innovation enhances human dignity, accessibility, trust, and human connection. As we look to the future, it is clear that empowerment would require all stakeholders to come together to leverage available resources. True empowerment also requires community participation. The department seeks deeper collaboration with partners across state governments for convergence and last mile delivery, philanthropic organizations and CSR entities for innovation and scalable models, civil society and community-based organizations for local insight and trust, and academic and research institutions for data-driven evaluation and impact assessment. These networks are the real engines of empowerment, ensuring communities are not passive recipients of welfare, but active co-creators of change. The department envisions a system where each individual, from a student under pre-matric scholarship to an entrepreneur, can be followed through a life cycle of empowerment. There is a need for collaborative social welfare architecture where the journey of each beneficiary is not just registered, but tracked, supported, and celebrated. Such an architecture would ensure that every individual is supported throughout their development journey and that each public investment yields tangible and measurable outcomes in terms of human capital, social capital, and financial capital. A future-ready social justice system must be anchored on three foundational pillars. The first is capital, encompassing not only financial capital, but also human and social capital. The second is capacity, built through robust institutions, reliable data system, and skilled personnel capable of delivering program. The third is collaboration, fostering purposeful partnership across governments and various other civil society, academia, etc. At the same time, it is imperative that technology remains human-centered, designed to enhance individual agency rather than enable surveillance and deepen exclusion. Today's discussion will yield actionable insights into how India can transition from a welfare delivery to empowerment-based social justice system that are adaptive, inclusive, and future-ready. It will help the department to identify a vision for an integrated social justice framework. These are collaborations that will align government efforts and through dialogue will emphasize the responsible use of technology and digital public infrastructure to expand access, affordability, safeguard dignity, and promote participation. To conclude, I quote Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam, empowerment must mean that every citizen can access opportunity with dignity and contribute to the nation's growth with pride. Thank you all.
Thank you, Shri Amit Yadav ji, for that powerful keynote. So we next have the panel title From Welfare to Empowerment, Building Future-Ready Social Justice Systems. Over to you, Vikram, to take it.
Thank you so much for that. It's such a pleasure to be here in front of this audience and with such an illustrious panel who've already all done cutting-edge work in taking forward the cause of social justice. So it'll be great to listen to you. I'd just like to take off from where Amitji left, because perhaps we can now, with that basic keynote out of the way, spend the next, 40 minutes trying to brainstorm how to actually do a lot of what he said. But can I just first start off by taking the principles that I think were so eloquently outlined by Amitji, which is that you need to transition the system itself from one where you are providing welfare to where you're setting up an ecosystem where people can also help themselves. I mean, there's this famous saying that you give somebody a fish, they're fed for a day. You teach them how to fish, they are fed for the rest of their lives. And I think that's a sort of a principle that seems to be coming across from the new philosophy. So I'd just like each of you to first talk about that a little bit. How can a new paradigm be set up where you're moving from a welfare state, which is about, in quote unquote, providing doles and providing handouts and giving somebody a government job or something else, to where you're really going to the most, the sections that need it the most, that need justice the most, that need empowerment the most, and to provide them the ability to take care of themselves. Why don't you go first, Shaveta?
Sure, thanks, Vikram. And thank you, Amitji, for laying out what that vision at a ministry level is, because that is really setting the context of what the country is committing to the highest need, the most underserviced, and thus far most marginalized. I think for me, it goes back and links very, it integrates to what stage of development the country has been in. If we go back to when India gained independence, there's a logic to why we started with our mechanisms being more welfare state oriented. How do we get everyone a seat on the table? And because I represent Central Square Foundation, we work in school education. If I was to take an example of, from within school education, building more schools and driving enrollment. The fundamental right to education, हर बच्चे को school आना है, हर बच्चे को पढ़ना है. That's the starting point. But from there to the dream of Viksit Bharat, to say that we are not happy just being the fastest growing economy, but we want to be the top 3 and over time the top 2 economic powers, is where that conversation needs to move away from welfare to empowerment. Once all citizens have been provided that minimum standard of everyone has access, how do we then equip them to take that access and leverage it for higher aspirations, both for self, society, and hence the country as a whole? And for me, education gets juxtaposed in the center of all of this, right? I think one theme, as I was thinking about this topic when we also did our briefing over the weekend, right? Like, there are so many forwards and backward linkages of how this will work. Even when Sir spoke about it, it's different sections of society. And across that social, educational, and economic perspective, how do we link it all together? So the welfare state access leads to a level of engagement where they can aspire for agency and help build the country. Thank you.
Right. Thanks for that. Rukmini, of course, we did hear, the point is education is, of course, essential in the first part of it. That has to lead to effective skills that can be utilized, which then has to lead to employment. And that's also something which we have to get our systems to do effectively. We were at a session this morning where we were hearing one of the greatest constraints that companies are facing in India is they don't have people with the skills that they need. Skilled talent in a country where we say there's unemployment, the correct skills are not available. So that entire chain also has to be built, presumably.
So I thought maybe providing a practitioner's point of view in figuring out how do you go from this provision to participation to bigger outcomes. So as Pratham, we work largely with children and families and with schools and Anganwadis and also with young people. And I think that the shift that in my time on working on this that I've seen is that if I want to move from provision to what I think next step is participation, where you feel that whatever is happening around you, you have to participate in it to make it go further. Now, I think we have both sides are important. There used to be a movie long ago called Hamara Gaon, Hamara Desh. So, desh ko badalna to bahut badi baat hai. But apne gaon ko badalna, and in small ways but meaningful ways, I feel that a lot of the work that I see around me is happening. I'll give you an example. That if I look at an Anganwadi or I look at a government school, they cater to many children, but they also cater to among the lower end of the distribution. Now, in that, if you are used to the fact that everything will come to you, then there's one kind of a mindset. But if you feel that you can participate in what happens in the school, then you're already a step ahead. And therefore, I would say that we have had mechanisms like school management committees or mothers groups and things like that. But if you really activate those, then you see a lot of participation, which then I feel leads to ownership. So if I look at a school and say कि ये school किसका है, तो first reaction is ये सरकारी school है. Then you say कि सरकार कौन है? Then people say वो DM है, वो ब्लॉक के ऑफिसर्स है, वो सरकार है. सरकार के पास पैसा कहाँ से आती है? जो राज करता है उसके पास पैसा होता है. You know, these are often their common reactions. So to explain that वो उनके पास जो पैसा होता है वो आपसे जाता है. And therefore that ये स्कूल हमारा स्कूल है, ये सरकारी स्कूल नहीं है. I think these are some of the first steps in moving from this provision idea to participation, to ownership, and then planning along a continuum to say this is not just about, you know, kids coming into school and learning a little bit, but this is a continuum of how a whole village or a whole cluster of villages does better every so many years than before, which includes better learning, better skilling, better involvement of people. So I think that this, to me, I feel the step from provision, the next step is participation and then ownership, and then kind of, you know, getting together to say what is it that we all aspire for. So I'm not sure I answered your question.
No, you did. You did.
But I've learned from TV that you say whatever you feel like.
That's. Luckily, I'm not in TV anymore, but you are absolutely correct. When I was in TV, that's exactly what would happen. You wait for what the question is, then you answer it whichever way you want to. It's an excellent learning. But okay, let me now get you to pin you down at least and try to get you to answer the next question I'm going to ask you. Because you, Advocate Parameshwar, are in the court and you are also fighting a lot for the people who need that help the most. I could spend an hour or two talking about what the problems with the legal system are, but I'm not sure that this is the correct forum or the panel for that. But this thing about going from provision to participation or empowerment and being able to take things, are there still large sections of society who are not there yet? I mean, some sections of society are, but some are not. I know you do a lot of work with manual scavengers, for example. They may still just need a much greater holding of hands than what, you know, sort of Shaveta was talking about, and we can aspire to that, but are there large sections of society which will need direct hand holding right now, from what you see?
See, the Constitution definitely has both visions of justice. It is, Constitution views justice as both protection as well as participation. There's no doubt about that. Its question is how do we work the Constitution to shift from one to the other. And when I say shift from one to the other, it's not to the exclusion of the other, but how you can subtly change our approaches. Because like she was mentioning that the first decade and two was spent in getting everybody onto the table. Representation was the key. Representation was the key. So I think the phrases that have been thrown around today is, I think it's from the state must shift from provider to enabler, from protection to participation, from amelioration to capacity building, and most importantly, from deprivation to self-respect. The last part I think is important because for a lot of communities, the question is of self-respect. And self-respect doesn't come out of merely handing over doles to them, not by merely giving them flood relief, not by giving them relief when they are affected. Question is capacity building, and that part, to take the point on skills also from you. Unfortunately, we are a country where certain set of skill sets are privileged over the others. We don't have the same kind of self-respect that is given to certain kinds of vocations, to certain jobs. You will see an Indian citizen refusing to do a job in India, but the same skill set is employed elsewhere, and there is inflow of foreign money here based on the same skill set. I think that is the change that needs to come. And I think there are genuinely communities which are fed up with this entitlement model. Because it's not about just giving them compensation at the end of violation of rights, about 5 lakhs, 10 lakhs, etc. But they are genuinely looking to a more transformative approach where participation actually brings that transformation. The other way status quo is maintained, you keep giving them relief, temporary relief. But I think there are communities, and the courts have worked this out wonderfully. In a lot of cases, they've worked it out wonderfully. But yes, as you say, the legal system has problems that we can't solve or talk about in an hour's time.
Okay, so we roughly know what needs to be done, and let's start trying to figure out how. So, Pritha, if I could just ask you, you've got an experience in many countries. there must be systems of, incentives, systems of accountability that actually exist in a large number of other countries, which perhaps we can also be inspired to, where this transition can start happening, where you start figuring out what are the outcomes that you want has to be really looked at a bit more than just whatever actual welfare is being doled out.
No, thanks for that question. And I think all of us know the problem, so it's good to start where we're going to solution. And maybe I'll take the fish analog a little forward, because I think the most thing we hear often is about teach someone to fish. But there's this very powerful story that for me really encapsulates what social justice and building ownership of communities means. So, just imagine taking a walk in a village and you see a small pond and you see one dead fish floating there. And you're disturbed because you've not seen a dead fish there ever before. And what do you think? I guess many of us would think that, okay, maybe the fish was old or fell sick and it died. You continue the walk in that village. The next pond, you see not just one dead fish, but maybe 2 or 3. And you're perplexed. But even there you think, okay, maybe the water got polluted, or there was some contamination or something that the fish jointly ate that was in the flora in the pond and they died. And then you continue to walk down that village further out and you see a bigger pond and there are like 30, 40, 50 dead fish all floating belly up in the water. And then that really makes us think, right, that it's not a fish problem, it's not a water problem, but really a groundwater issue. And the reason I say that as a story here is that I think a lot of these approaches about treating it as a benefit issue or even an empowerment issue is actually treating the symptoms, what you see from the outside, treating it like a fish problem or a pond water problem, but really to address this, to move it to self-respect, dignity is really addressing it as a more systemic groundwater issue. And there are many examples actually in India. Now, having had the privilege at Bridgespan to work across countries, I actually think India can be a forerunner. We are seeing the West, like the United States, really contend with, black rights, racial issues. We are seeing Southeast Asia reel under ethnicity issues. How do you integrate? And I think India actually can be a shining light in many good examples. But of course, us as Indians tend to look at what we can do better, not what we have done well. But on the solution part, other than the systemic point, which I'd start with, I would say that giving communities greater dignity, greater ownership, really involves looking at it from a very intersectional issue. And it's a very simple thing that if we look at our own children, right, like we would not think of giving our children only the best of education, but not worrying about what water, sanitation, healthcare, livelihoods they have access to. So why do we have a very siloed approach when we look at poverty alleviation or community ownership? And maybe I'll just provide one example for a solution. And some of you here know, I'm looking at Ashwin and Paresh, who led the tribal health initiative in a big way for India, working with NITI and Ministry of Tribal Affairs, etc., to set up India's first tribal health collaborative. But there's a smaller tribal health initiative in the district of Sitlingi in Tamil Nadu that this month actually won a global award for the first time. They won the Global Health Equity Award, sitting in Tamil Nadu in India. And on the other hand, Educate Girls was just awarded 2 days ago the Raman Magsaysay Award, the first Indian NGO to win this honor. And in their model, you actually get glimpses of what worked well, which is to go beyond just a siloed approach to provide one service. But the Sitlingi model, for example, provides better tribal healthcare. The nurses trained in the tribal program have now become the president of the panchayat, so local governance. They have set up Porgai, which is a tribal women embroidery and tailoring unit. In fact, very coincidentally, not planned, this kurta I'm wearing is stitched by Porgai. It's hand embroidered, and that gives them better lives, dignity, and livelihoods. They've also set up another agency that provides jobs for the men and children and youth in the community. So very holistic approach that addresses inequity and community ownership at the grassroots level.
Right, let's now turn our attention to two aspects of building capacity. How do you, number one, set up the architecture for how you're converting, linking welfare to mobility, and also, how are you building organizations and communities that you can do this at scale? That's two aspects of building that entire architecture out. So, Shaveta, why don't I start by asking you, To some extent, what we were talking about a little earlier, linking education, skilling, jobs, careers, livelihoods, in a sustainable manner. If you had to rethink that, re-architect that, how would you do it? Or does it not require too much rethinking?
No, I think there are certain fundamental structures which we will have to start with. But it doesn't necessarily have to be as sequential as it's always been. A lot of these archetypes are also, they seem set in stone, but they were set in stone for that time and that context. I mean, I'm a generation where life had a linear path, right? You did school, you did college. If you didn't do masters, you got married and you had kids. That's a linear path. We are talking today in the context of just for tech and AI, the value of a master's degree. And I know I'm still talking a privileged section of society which is thinking higher education, when less than 50% of our children in government school even reach secondary education level, right? So one, I genuinely feel that the fact that it can only be structured in a linear path was relevant in a certain reality, in a certain context. And I'll also borrow from Pritha's, the whole idea of intersection, right? How are different factors coming together? To me, education still is a fundamental structure that we can't bypass. We are talking empowerment, we are talking agency. When we are starting, and in India, every conversation is about the demographic dividend. So the fundamental base structure of school education, Anganwadis, government school, the provision of free primary education, I think that is the bedrock. But what different avenues can be taken on top of that? Does every Indian child that go to a school should aspire for tertiary education? Is vocational or skilling more relevant? Is more empowering, both from an economic perspective and a social perspective? In the context and when that child, family, and community lives, I think needs to be revisited. And the intersectionality becomes important from the fact what is relevant and viable in that particular community. The other problem when we talk about welfare and agency is that the only way for me to have a voice is to get out of the, mera gaon, mera desh and shahar chalo. The whole urbanization is then in fact imposing a much larger challenge because the relevant context is not solving for that agency and empowerment.
So I think that is put really well, but if you do want to move away from linear paths, then is it time for us to start thinking also at the community levels, to start figuring out how people can be co-creators in creating that capability? Why does it have to be linear that you're going to school? Maybe at a very early stage, then you can have not just the teachers and the children and the parents, but others in the community who can help in start empowering skills if they are agricultural skills or handicraft skills or other skills. So find ways of making people then participants and co-creators in capability. Is that something which is starting to happen?
No, I think absolutely. And if I think about the period after COVID, because I think COVID taught everybody lots of things, whether you wanted to learn it or not, you had to. So we see two demographic trends in India that at least in the places where we work, both with young children and slightly older children, paying off real dividends and an openness within the government to accept some of these, layers on top of what the institution already does. And I'll give you an example. In Maharashtra, the Nipun Maharashtra, which is our, the national goal to get all children reading and doing math by grade 3, a lot is happening inside the school. But we have a section of mothers. In fact, all mothers of young children today, if you looked at their profile, mothers of kids who are age 3 to age 8, and fathers, I'm picking mothers because they're sometimes more available at the school level. They have a very, very different profile from if you looked at the same population 10 years ago. The ASAR report that we bring out, we happen to collect parents' information, which we hadn't actually looked at until quite recently. And so these are young mothers, they are available, they have years of schooling. Even in a Rajasthan or Bihar or UP, more than 40% mothers have more than 5 years of schooling. So they are a human capital that is available. Now, how do you harness this to actually support the learning and the growth of kids? So Nipun Maharashtra has a mothers group program for every Zilla Parishad school, where mothers get together in small groups in their own neighborhood. They actually do some activities that come to them through WhatsApp. and they provide kind of a scaffolding structure to the school. The schools are now looking at these as additional resources. For a whole variety of reasons, women of this age group in rural India have quite low labor force participation. So that's a problem in many ways, but to me, it's sort of a potential of human capital that can be harnessed to look at, how you can enhance what's happening in school, increases participation, increases ownership, and really lifts up what impact is possible. One more example is, we all know we have many, many young people. And I feel from looking at the young people we work with, that if you get a very positive experience early in life, it changes the way you approach opportunities. So just this last summer, the ASER report comes out in January for the previous year. And think about this, that the kids who are today in 6th standard should have been in 1st or 2nd in the COVID years. So their basic learning levels were weak. Summer holidays, you have a lot of young people who are not in high school or college. And there was a call put out in which many different institutions participated to say, can you give 1 month in your own village for the kids, probably from the school from which you have come out, to get this improved learning. 7 lakh volunteers, young people, high school and college students, who felt they were participating in the growth and the future of their own village. I think these are examples to say that we have a lot of latent human capital. Young people who are very happy. I often ask them, I traveled a lot during that time, क्यों कर रहे हो यार, पैसे तो मिल नहीं रहे. They said, हाँ, but हमारे सर ने कहा है कि आप करो. And बच्चों को सिखाते हुए हमें भी बड़ी सीख मिल रही है. और हमें दिख रहा है कि हम काफ़ी चीज़ें कर सकते हैं. I'm not a trained teacher, but with a little bit of guidance, I've been able to add impact. So how do we use our underlying sort of trends, the openness that we have within our policies or our frameworks, to really build these experiences which make people feel that I can plan together for my own village, and together we can think of, what goes on ahead.
I'm going to shift to building capacity and capability in our organizations. And Pritha, I'm going to start with you first. Where do you think the capacity needs to be built? And you've done a lot of work in multi-stakeholder, collaborations to deliver outcomes. What all needs to be strengthened and at what level? Government, NGOs, private sector. I'm going to come to you about the courts, which is why I started with her. But what needs to be done with the institutions to enable them to deliver better outcomes?
So, that needs to be done, of course, a lot of change required from how we operate today. But the first one, and maybe I'll ask the question to this audience, right, which has a lot of non-profit and foundation leaders. When we look at the results framework, because we always get what you measure, right? And how many of us actually integrate non-programmatic indicators in our results framework? So if you're an education organization, your results framework is about number of children reached, learning outcomes, ASA measures it, as Rukmini was alluding. If you're a health organization, it's about children's lives saved, maternal mortality, child mortality. SDGs, previously MDGs also have the same. So I think the biggest challenge which we are realizing now is, how does it look to integrate community empowerment ownership indicators in every one of our results framework if we are philanthropic civil society actors? And by that I mean, irrespective whether you do health, education, climate, livelihoods, how can we measure whether we are building communities' power, communities' assets, and their inclusion indicators? And today, many NGOs, but at the grassroots level, community level, and some of the larger ones that are also focused on justice have this, but it's not prevalent across the nation or in all the people that work on justice issues. The second change that's required is, I think, how do we leverage markets and business? Because we all know that philanthropy is single-digit percentage of the total social sector spend. Government, of course, has a lot of focus on welfare measures, and it's heartening to hear, as Amitji was mentioning, the shift in being much more of an enabler. And is that really pervasive across government departments as well? But I think on the business side, there are very few stars. There are a few who, for example, integrate some dimension of justice in their model. It could be persons with some form of intellectual or physical disabilities. We are seeing now restaurants, for example, being run by persons with disabilities. We are seeing initiatives for scheduled caste, scheduled tribe, or persons from backward communities. But these are still very few, like you can literally count on your fingers. So, I know there were equal number of champions as skeptics when CSR was mandated. But I wonder now whether it's time, whether it's a mandate or some kind of softer push, like on the credit financial services sector, to really require our private sector businesses to have a stronger lens. And lens, as you said, not just representation, but truly improving the lives and livelihoods. Because as long as it's just representation, it's very easy to tick the box. Hire so many women, no one cares what role they're doing also. Mostly they're foot soldiers, not the general. So I think that probably is the second or third change that I would say is required across stakeholders in society.
Right. Well, Advocate Parameshwar, we're talking about institutions, that we need to think about. Justice is there in the two words, social justice. And in my years as a reporter, I felt that one of the things that worries the people who are impoverished or who need empowerment, one of the things that concerns them the most is they don't have easy access to justice by going to the courts, because they see that the system is weighted against them. They feel this tariq pe tariq is something that they cannot actually manage to contend with. They can't find a way of getting legal redressal for whatever their grievances or their problems are. Now, efforts have been made to bring about a change, notably by many of the laws that have recently been passed. Prevention of atrocity against SCSTs and other such laws have been passed. But in general, how would you suggest that the legal system and courts can improve their own capability so that justice is delivered at a better and a more easier manner?
See, I'll talk about the legal aid system, because we are talking about communities which otherwise do not have access to justice. I don't think there can be any doubt that the legal assistance in India is not available to the average citizen. It's priced at a level that a lot of I think 30-40% of the population will not be able to afford the kind of justice that the other remaining 60% are able to afford. The legal aid system here is premised on a very colonial system of legal aid, where there is an external help to you. So as lawyers, and there have been some changes to the way this legal aid system works, but the predominant consideration of the legal aid system is that as lawyers, we have to reach out to communities and serve them with legal aid. That, I think, is the first transformation that we require, saying that we need legal aid within the communities. Like she was saying, participative volunteer groups she was mentioning. I'm saying that...
If you could just hold that. Yeah, maybe you can,
right.
Hold it in the left hand, yeah.
That shift, I'm saying, where legal aid is from an external source, from an external stimuli that you give legal aid, I think we need to develop a legal aid model where communities can themselves source legal aid. Either you have a participative model where volunteers from the community can be skilled up, not as full-time lawyers, but at least as paralegals from the community to access legal aid. I think this is the first shift that we can, which will have to be thoughtfully done. It can't be ad hoc in one place for a set of community. No, I think this has to be thoughtfully done over a period of time, and I think this will provide much needed access to justice that certain communities don't have. That's number one. Two, and I think wonderful work has been done over the last 3-4 years, both because of the initiative of the Supreme Court and certain high courts, and the government working in tandem on this count, is language is the single most barrier for a lot of legal aid that must reach. And I think one positive, if you identify what the single biggest break in the last 5 years we have done, I think the court and the government has come together to break this language barrier. Translation, document translation, judgment translation. What is more, I think this must go with simplifying the text of the law. If both these are achieved, say in a graded manner in the next 10-15 years, I think we will be able to see a lot of difference in how justice is being accessed in this country. This is the single most important factor, language, because as of today, I think 90% of legal service happens only in one language, English. Not even in Hindi, not even in the other languages in this country. much of the system works on English. If that change is something, if we can break this chain of continuously doing it in English, I think there will be substantial difference.
Right, that's very interesting. Just want to move now to the question of, before we run out of time, the question of collaboration, because another thing that we have heard about is the need to get various players in the ecosystem to start working together. Government, NGOs, organizations, philanthropic bodies, foundations, people on the, on the ground, self-help groups. How do we facilitate collaboration between all of them? Which of you want to take that?
So I think you need some practice of collaboration, right? It's a good thing in principle, but how do you make it practical? And I have one or two examples I can show. For example, I see Mr. Prabhakar here sitting in the audience. I think he's there, although it's dark. This is ITC. So we work with them in a number of locations in India, working all the way from Anganwadi all the way to skilling. So how do you get collaboration between different arms of government, between the community and the institutions? You need to practice it over a period of time to figure out how these will work. So you need laboratories, you need places where you are continuously working it out at a micro level. And then when it moves to the much bigger level, you are in a position, at least I feel as Pratham, we are in a position to say, this worked here, so let's try it there. I'll give you a very recent example. Rural Livelihood Mission of Telangana is very interested in improving many things of their own members. But in particular, they have in Telangana 5 districts in which they really want to concentrate on the tribal populations having better services. The Rural Livelihoods Mission will do their part, but they will convene a meeting of the Women and Child Welfare Department and the School Department under their kind of geographical areas of interest, and from the government side bring it together. And they've been searching for people who can help in this cross-fertilization. So I think bringing these different forces together at different levels can be done. And I think all participants need to have some history and geography of how to do it, because there'll be ups and downs. But I think this is quite doable, because together at the macro level, you can achieve things which then enables micro level experiments to go further. And I think nothing succeeds like success. So once you've done it somewhere, you feel, aur jagah pe bhi ho sakta hai. So practical examples, I think, really help.
Right. Pritha, you want to add to that very quickly, and especially for this audience, any examples that you know of where philanthropic capital, for example, has helped the state in getting additional capacity and capability?
Yeah, many. So we've published 2 reports on collaborative philanthropy, and it jumped by 5x post-COVID, partly driven by the pandemic need. In a nutshell, if I were to put it in very simple terms, we all talk about collaboratives helping build stronger ecosystems. But I think to build ecosystems, you need to demolish ecosystems, because the biggest issue in collaboration we are seeing in India and globally is everyone wants control, everyone wants recognition. And by collaborating, you have to give that up, because whether you're collaborating across funders, non-profits, government, it's a shared success. So no one foundation can say we have enabled million, and the other one also says it, then you're actually double, triple counting. So I think that is a very key factor. Examples, there are numerous ones today in India, so actually you can pick, I don't know if Ashifji is here, but Migrants Resilience Collaborative, nobody even thought of migrants till you saw those really sad video clips during COVID of our labor force walking back on foot to their villages when they were thrown out of their livelihoods options. You have the Dasra Adolescent Collaborative, again, adolescent well-being. In fact, Ministry of Health made RMNCH, RMNACH with adolescent included only a couple of decades ago, believe it or not. And Dasra Adolescent Collaborative, helped inform policy, mobilized adolescents and youth across many states. The Piramal Tribal Health Collaborative, Aspirational Districts Collaborative have MOUs with government, has mobilized funding to the tune of 7 to 10x for several of their programs from unused government budgets, and also mobilized communities in the aspirational districts. So another example. So actually we are not spoiled for examples. To Rukmini's point on nothing succeeds like success, the biggest issues with collaborative and in fact with our sector in general is what is success. So because somebody might say we are very successful, your neighbor will actually, throw a rotten tomato at you and say, sorry, my model is more successful, because we don't have shareholder value, we don't have market capitalization. So in fact, I would say it's very important for a collaborative to define what is their impact goal upfront and then report. Be transparent to report annually on how you're reaching there, because then at least you can measure that you're making progress against the goal, because otherwise it's one person's word for the other on success. So I think those are probably some of our learnings.
All right, let me turn to the last subject then that I do want to talk to her about. I'm going to throw it to you, Shaveta. Is the question of digital transformation, because this is actually a great time to be talking about changing paradigms, because the paradigms to some extent are in any case going to be changing around us thanks to technology, thanks to the digital public infrastructure that we are starting to see, the potential of AI around the corner and the changes that that's going to bring. It may have its own implications also on which are the communities you need to start thinking and worrying about. May not be that much the young. The elderly communities, for example, are also people who need a lot of help and a lot of assistance. And if it comes to digital transformation, they may need the most amount of hand-holding because they're not as tech-savvy as others are. So how are we going to think about this? It should be a tool of empowerment, but we have to make sure that it actually works that way.
No, Vikram, in fact, whether or not it should be, it is a tool of empowerment or of disempowerment, but tech is here to stay. I think we've all heard the phrase of tech immigrants versus tech natives, right? The next generation is a tech native. Children intuitively are engaging with technology at a much faster rate. Specifically during COVID, we are talking about, the older people. A lot of NGOs actually did community outreach on helping older people engage with their phones, engage with WhatsApp, because that's a generation which was otherwise getting left behind. Tech is here to stay. Tech is super powerful. Different reports across the industry, right, including Asar Rukmini, right, talks about the fact that Indian households now across SEC own more than one phone. The phone is no longer with the earning member father, but there is a second phone which the mother owns, which the family has access to. For both, not just from an education perspective, I will bring that very quickly because that's the work we do, right? But even across any ecosystem, tech has to be thought of as an integrated solution. The idea is not that, with AI, a hologram teacher will replace our higher education institutions. What's the leverage? What's the additional momentum that tech can add? The biggest power of tech is it is removing the information asymmetry. Today, a farmer in a remote area can have access to weather prediction, kya hai, mera soil type kya hai, how should I approach that? From information access to converting into how can I actually leverage it for better economic opportunity. When a child has access to a device at home, which is probably, the child's mother's phone for playing, usko shiksha ke liye kaise use kiya ja sakta hai? Tech is here to stay. Access is no longer a problem. How do we solve for information asymmetry and integrate the tech solution as a mainstream for all social interventions, which these collaboratives across government, civil society, and organizations should set up?
Well, one other obvious area where it could help is what you were saying about the language problem, right? If AI comes in, translation becomes ubiquitous, you're not necessarily disadvantaged because you don't speak English, because it will be within a couple of years a trivial matter to get anything translated to any language.
No, not just language and AI, but I think over the last 4 years, again, the byproduct of the pandemic, is that a lot of litigants need not be physically present in court. One of the biggest problems is we fail to realize is that our justice delivery system is centralized, and because certain kinds of courts are only available at district headquarters or only in one or two places in the entire state. And I don't mean the High Court and the Supreme Court. I'm saying courts which you have to go daily to get access to justice for the immediate needs, even they are centralized. I'm saying one big change that technology and especially COVID has given us, the fact that a litigant needn't be physically present at any stage of his proceeding. And I think that's biggest game changer so far as technology is concerned and justice delivery is concerned, that we can go paperless, we can go without having a physical courtroom, but it has its pitfalls. And I think the courts are addressing that now, one after the other.
I think we're nearly out of time. Rukmini ji, maybe one last line from you. Or two lines if you want, 35 seconds.
So I think you have to look, you have to look around you. I think there are a lot of people who are willing to help, but you have to think that they can help. So, for example, I feel that if panchayats in India are given an opportunity to send a RFP to panchayats to say, what is your idea for social justice? We mean this, this, this. I bet thousands of panchayats will write in. But we should then believe that they are capable of delivering on what they plan. So I think open your arms, open your eyes. There are solutions out there, and enable people to come up with what they think.
All right, exactly out of time, but I'll give you one word. Pritha.
Yeah, no, I was just reminded of a small joke when you spoke about paper, because I'm noticing that all of us are taking notes on paper and are very light notes since time's up. I was on a call and taking notes as usual on paper and recording something, and my teenage daughter walks in and said, Mama, what is this old-fashioned way that you're still like writing paper, thinking, drawing on paper? And I told her, old is gold. And she looked at me like fair and square and said, Mama, old is mold. And, for a second, I was just taken aback. But, really, I would say, in addition to what Rukmini said about believing and getting ideas, to really trust today's youth, because, one, we do need to integrate technology where possible, but also need to reorient the way we think, right? And I think for us, it's hard because we're used to a certain way of doing things. So the next generation, hopefully, will find better ideas that can solve some of the issues we are contending with.
Thank you all so much. We are flat out of time, but some really, really interesting suggestions from all of you. Thanks a lot for being with us.